In this video, I'm going to show you how I coded a Python bot to literally find me an apartment in the city where I live in at a really good price. What we will be using is something called web scraping, which is a skill that I think every programmer should learn because it is so versatile and allows you to build so many amazing and useful projects that you can either, number one, put on your portfolio and help you land a job, or number two, even build a profitable full-scale business around the project. What we will be learning today is number one, how to get started with web scraping even if you're a complete beginner, the full project of how I use web scraping using Python to automate my process of finding an apartment to live in, including a full tutorial of the project for complete beginners, and the full code will also be down below in the description. And number three, how to overcome the most common problems that you will eventually run into when you are web scraping, because the thing that you might not realize is that a lot of websites don't actually like it if you are using a Python bot to scrape them. So we'll be learning a very easy method to get over all these problems very quickly. So with that said, let's talk about web scraping. So if you don't know what web scraping is, if you're not aware of it, then I'm just gonna briefly explain this to you. If you already know what web scraping is, you can go into this timestamp down below. So what web scraping essentially means is that, let's say you're opening up a web browser and you're opening up any website you want to go into, like let's say Amazon or Airbnb or wherever you're going. What web scraping simply means is that we're doing that same process of opening up a web browser on some web page, except we're doing it using code. So we're essentially creating like a small Python bot that is going to go to the internet on your behalf. So in many cases, let's say, for example, in this tutorial, we want to find some information about a bunch of apartments in whatever city you live in. Instead of going there manually and manually writing out and copying the different apartments and the prices and things like this, we can simply send this Python bot and instruct it to look at the web page and only extract the information that we're interested in, and then return that information for us for further processing, so we can do whatever we as humans want to do with it, so we don't need to spend the time to manually do all this data gathering. It's very common for any tasks like this where we want to extract a bunch of information from the internet. Like you could think of extracting job postings or like e-commerce data or whatever you're interested in, where doing all of that manually would be either cumbersome or it would just take a bunch of time basically. So now I'm going to show you how you can easily get started with web scraping, then we'll go over some of the problems, how to overcome them, and finally we'll build this full project. So to get started with web scraping, what you're going to need to do is install two packages, just two packages that you're going to need, and you're going to do it using a command like this: pip install requests and beautiful soup 4. So requests is a library that simply allows us to access the internet directly using Python, and beautiful soup is a library that actually allows us to then interact with these actual HTML web pages using our code very easily. So you're going to run this command, you're going to install them. I've already installed them, so it's not actually going to do anything, but then what you're going to do is import both of these. We're going to import requests, and the way you're going to import the other one is from BS4, you're going to go import beautiful soup. And I think the first B has to be capitalized, just like this. Now, to actually access the internet using Python, this is going to be very simple. You're going to simply create a variable called URL, where you're going to paste as a string the URL where you essentially want to send your Python bot. In this particular video, we're going to be using this website called The Blue Ground. It's essentially like a platform where you can find a lot of furnished short-term rentals in a lot of places in the world. So you're going to go here and look at the city that you're interested in. For the purposes of this example, we're going to use Dubai because Dubai is where I live. And you're going to search this up and you're going to copy this URL from up here, and you're going to go and save it as a variable in your Python code. Then you're going to create another variable called response that is going to equal request.get, where the first parameter is going to be the URL that you want to use, and that's really it for now. And now what you're going to be able to do is simply print this response to see if we are able to access this website successfully. So we're going to run that, and what we're going to get is something like this. It said response 200. 200 in the case of web requests in programming essentially means a successful response. Now we don't see the website yet, but we see that we were successfully able to send a GET request to get the contents of this web page using Python code. Now to actually see the contents of this web page, we're going to use this other library. And to do that, we're going to create yet another variable called soup that's going to be equal to beautiful soup. And as the first parameter, we're going to say response.text. And as the second one, we're going to need to define essentially how we want to parse this HTML that is going to come back. And we're going to say html.parser. And now what we're going to do is then instead of printing this response, we're going to print soup. And what beautiful soup is essentially going to do is going to take that web page and essentially parse it for us in a format that now we can start searching up things from this. Essentially what we got is basically the entire HTML of the website that we're looking at, and from there we can now start extracting the exact data that we're looking for. But before we move on to the actual project, there's a couple of issues that you're going to run into essentially every time you do this web scraping. For example, a lot of websites don't really like seeing their websites being scraped by bots. They want to only see human traffic going into their websites. So what's going to happen a lot of the time is that you'll build an amazing web scraper, you use it a bit of time, but then it's going to end up being blocked by the website because they see that the same IP address, and IP address is essentially like the computer world address of your computer, where every time you request something from a website, they can see the IP address where that request is coming from. If the same IP address is used too many times, the site is going to detect like, okay, that must be a bot, because a real human wouldn't do like 100 requests in a minute or something like that. Another thing that might happen is that there might be what's called captchas. So you might have seen many times when you go to a website, they have this little captcha where you need to like type out some numbers from a picture or something to essentially show the website that you're not a bot. You might have geo restrictions as well. Some websites might not be available in your country. So all of these are very common problems they're going to run into when you are doing web scraping. And one common solution to a lot of these problems is to use what's called a proxy server. So what a proxy is essentially like a thing in between you and the website that you're trying to access. And what that proxy will do will essentially bypass these captchas, and you can set these proxies to be physically located in wherever you want. So let's say some website is only available in Canada, you can set the proxy to have an IP address in Canada so that your target website thinks that your request is coming from Canada. And to prevent the IP address blocking, what these proxies can then do is essentially rotate your IP address so that with every request that you're sending, the proxy server is going to have a different IP address. Now all of this probably sounds very complicated, and you might already be like, I don't want to do web scraping at all. Well, you don't have to be worried, because there's actually a very easy solution to this, because what you can use is a service called DataImpulse. Now, DataImpulse, who are very kindly sponsoring this video as well, essentially provide you access to ready-made proxies that you can then use directly in your web scraping projects. All you need to do is use DataImpulse, put that proxy in between your request and your target website, and I'll show you how to do that in just a few lines of code in a second. And then you essentially just automatically bypass all of these problems that I just described. They offer a couple of different types of proxies. They offer data center proxies, where essentially what that means is that the IP addresses that the proxy uses are essentially generated at these data centers. The pro is that it's going to be cheaper, but the con is that it's going to be easier to detect because these aren't technically real IP addresses. What we're going to be using is something called a residential proxy, where essentially what they've done is sourced actual real IP addresses from real residential addresses, and you're using these IP addresses to make these requests. And by the way, if you were to do this yourself, you need to be very careful, because it's actually illegal to do this without permission, and if you're not doing it ethically, you might end up in problems. So what DataImpulse has also done is simply taking care of the sourcing of these IP addresses and made sure that it's all completely legal, so you don't have to worry about any of that. They have proxies in 195 locations, and they have a pay-as-you-go pricing model where you can get started with just one $1 for 1 GB of traffic, which is pretty good. So before we move on to the project, I'm just going to show you how you can get started with DataImpulse and put these proxy servers so that your web scraper will always work with no problems. What you're going to do is go to dataimpulse.com and you're going to click on try now. And then what's going to happen is that you're going to create an account, and once you go through the process, you're going to see a dashboard like this, where then you're going to add a plan for the type of proxy that you want to use. And once you go in here, you're going to be able to see this proxy access box at the top left. Keep this in mind because we'll need a couple of details from here in a second. You're going to see your usage and how you can add gigabytes for you to use. Then you're going to have a proxy configuration where you're going to essentially choose the countries from which these IP addresses are going to be sourced from. I've just chosen a couple of countries here for example purposes. You can choose the interval at which these IP addresses are going to be rotated, whether you only want anonymous proxies and things like this. And there's a couple of other settings that you can set here. And then what you can do is you can go to these tutorials site on the DataImpulse website. That's going to have a bunch of easy to use tutorials for whatever you're using to use your web scraper. What we are using is Python requests. So we're just going to find Python requests from here. We're going to click on learn more, and it's just going to give you a couple of lines of code that you're going to want to copy into your project to add these proxies to your project automatically. So what we're going to do is go in here, copy paste these, and you're going to have these two in here that you're going to need to fill: your proxy login and your proxy password. And you're going to find these from your DataImpulse dashboard from this top left hand corner up here. I'm not going to show you mine for obvious reasons so you don't steal my stuff, but you would fill this in, and then the only thing you need to do is on this line right here where you're sending the request to the server, you're going to need to add one more parameter, which is going to be proxies, which is going to be equal to proxies, which is going to be this object here that we have created. So this takes care of all of that for us. Now we have this proxy infrastructure in between us and the target website automatically, and that is just everything that you need to do. You don't need to worry about anything else. Pretty neat and very easy. Now to continue on with our project, we're gonna go back to our website in here, and we need to now think about what is the data that we actually want to access from this site. So what we can see here is that we have a bunch of these different apartments, and what we would probably like is to get the name of the apartment, like the building name and things like this, plus the price. And what I'd probably want to do is only include apartments that are below a certain price. Let's say I have a budget and I don't want to scroll through all of these. Now I know obviously I could do this using these filters in here, but let's say like every day I want to be able to check whether there are new apartments available at my budget. I can set this so that my scraper will every day at a certain time find all the apartments, like all the new listings, for example, at a certain price, and then send them to me as an email. So I don't have to manually go in here every single day. So the way we do that is we need to now look at the HTML of this page and figure out where are these elements that we're interested in. Specifically, for example, we're interested in all of these different cards. So what we're going to do is click on inspect, which you can do by left clicking and then going down here to inspect. And then we can see the entire HTML of this page. And from here, by hovering over these different elements, Chrome is going to show to us which element we are essentially hovering over. So if we go in here and we click inspect again, it's going to take us to these details. So the way this seems to work in here is that we have, for every one of these apartments, the top element is going to be this A tag in here that is going to have this href, and what we're going to look for is the class of this A tag. And what we can then do is copy this class name and using Beautiful Soup, essentially tell our Beautiful Soup to look at this soup, which is the entire HTML, and look for all of the A tags that have a class of property. Let's see how to do that. We can do something like this. For example, we're going to create an apartment list variable. It's going to be equal to soup.find all. So find all is going to be a method that is included in this Beautiful Soup library to find elements that we're looking for. And as the first parameter to this find all function, we're going to input the type of tag that we're looking for. We're looking for an A tag because this is an A tag. And then what we're looking for, and this is essentially the filter that we're using to essentially determine what kinds of A tags we're looking for. We're going to set it so that it has a class underscore equal to the class that we just copied, which is going to be property. So what this is going to do is return us a list of all of the A tags that it finds that match this condition. Then what we can do is run a for loop for apartment in apartment list, and we're just going to print all of them to make sure that this is working properly, and we're no longer going to print the entire soup. Now once we run this, there seems to be a problem. Max retries, of course, because I forgot to actually add the proxy login and proxy password. I'm gonna go and do that and then come back to you. All right, I've now gone ahead and copied those in. I'm not gonna show them to you, but now it should work. Let's try that. And as you can see, we receive a list of a bunch of A tags that seem to be corresponding to all of these A tags in here that correspond to all of these apartments. So that is a great start. Now, what is the information that we're actually looking for all of these apartments? Well, we would want to find out the name in here. We'd want to find out the price and also probably the link, so that I can just receive a list of all of these, and any of them that sound interesting to me, I can just click on the link directly to go into the listing. Well, the link is going to be the easiest because it is directly in this anchor tag in here with this href property. So what we can do using Beautiful Soup, there is another function called get, so which we can access by going apartment.get, and what we're getting is the href from this anchor tag, and we're going to save that as a URL variable right here. And it seems like the URL is only the specific endpoint to that apartment. So what we're going to want to do is also append to this URL the sort of root URL, theblueground.com right here. So it's going to be this plus URL. And now just to make sure that everything works correctly, we're just going to print URL like that. Would you look at that? We get a bunch of URLs right here. Now the next step is going to be to get the title and the price. The way we do that is using a slightly different function. So we're going to create a variable called price that is going to be equal to something called apartment. And we can't use get here because the price isn't directly included in this tag. What is actually included is in a child element of this A tag. So we're going to need to navigate all the way down until we find this price. So it looks like this price is included in, and we need to go quite far down here, is included in this element down here. So it's a span tag with a class of price amount. So what we can try to do is simply use this one, and we're going to use a function called find. So what we're looking for is a span, and now it's only looking for spans within this apartment tag in here. It's not looking at the entire document. It's only within this one. I hope there's only one, but we'll see. So we're looking for a span with a class of this price amount. And notice here we're using find and not find all, because I'm anticipating that there is only one of them. If there's multiple that we're looking for, we would use find all. If we're only looking for one, then we use find. So let's see if this works. We're going to print price in here, and it looks like it indeed worked. We get the correct element. Now the last thing we need to do is actually get this price and not this entire element. And the way we do that is by then getting from the return value of this simply text, and we're just going to strip like this. Now we're going to run that again, and would you look at that, now we're getting all the prices. So in the same kind of way, we now want to find this name in here. So we're going to hover over these until we find the place that we're looking for, and it looks like it also has the area and the name in separate ones, so that's pretty useful. So what we're going to do is simply copy paste this twice and name this, let's call this building because I think it's the building name, and then the area, and we're doing the exact same thing except using slightly different class names like that. And this one is property address like that, and we're gonna print building as well as area as well. Let's see if everything is working correctly, and it looks like it is. I'm quite surprised. Often there's quite a bit more problems than this when using web scraping. With that said, the last thing we now want to do is create probably another list called filtered apartments that is initialize as an empty list. And then at the end here, we're just gonna append a dictionary that has like URL, area, building, price, and we'll probably do this so that the price is a number, because this is actually taking it as a string. So the price is going to be price dot replace comma empty string to take away the comma, like for example right here, and then we're going to cast that to, let's say, float. That should work. End of all of this, we're simply going to print filter departments. Let's see if I made any mistakes. Looks like, oh, of course, because this has to be URL like this, area like this as a string. This one needs to come for that. Run it now. Now it looks like everything is working correctly. We're getting price as a float, amazing, just like that. And now we can actually do the filtering where we say if price, and actually we'll do this price conversion earlier than this. We'll say price is now equal to this, and we'll say if price is below, let's say, a budget, and we'll create a function, define get apartments, we'll get a budget, and now all of this will be inside of this function. We'll get a URL, that, and a budget, and now at the end we're gonna run get apartment with the URL and let's say a budget of 8,000, and this is dirhams, by the way, the UAE currency, not dollars, so you're gonna need to use the correct currency. So if price is less than budget, only then we add it to the filtered apartments, and then at the end we print them, and we also return filtered apartments. And there's a problem, except because I forgot to add the edited price in here. We'll do that, and would you look at that, now we are only getting apartments that are below my budget. Now we will actually leave this here, but if you want to see the absolute full project, then I have it here, where actually I'm adding a ton more code to it. I'm adding here like an email function that is then sending it to me as an email every day. I'm scheduling it to happen once a day. I will leave this full project down below in the description, but I will actually leave it to you as a challenge to now expand this to whatever you want. Probably you're not going to be using the exact website that I am using because it's going to depend on your location, what you're looking for. So use this same idea in whatever website that you would use to look at apartments for either short-term or long-term, of whatever you're renting, whatever location you're interested in, and then expand this a little bit. Schedule this to run every day, send the results to you as an email, and actually make this useful for you. I'm going to leave that to you. And again, thank you for DataImpulse for sponsoring this video, making this video possible. Make sure to use these proxies in your project. It's very, very easy to set up. And if you run into any problems with captchas, with geo-blocking, things like this, then DataImpulse is going to be your solution. I will leave my link down below in the description so you can get started with it, explore it, things like this. With that said, if you want to see more amazing Python projects that you can do with your Python skills to add to your portfolio, to enhance your skills, then I'm going to leave that video right there, where there's going to be a ton more project ideas for you. You guys have really loved that video, so go watch it next, and I will see you in the next one.